So you are what you eat. Now, I know this phrase is very much overused, but actually up until recent times, Western medical sort of ideology has been to split the body into different sections. So we think of it as like your mind and your body and your spirit, and we split them into different sections and put them into different categories as if they're not linked. But actually your mental health is as linked to your thoughts as it is linked to your gut. There's a nerve that runs from the top of your brain, in effect, down through your body, down to the bottom. It's called the vagus nerve. It's one of the biggest nerves that runs in the body. And this vagus nerve, originally, they thought was a one-way communication that talked from your brain down to your body, and that there was no communication back. But actually, in the last few years, they've recognized that there is communication upwards as well. And so, whereas previously it was thought that your brain was the control center for everything, and that everything else was more just like a bit of a robot that was being controlled by the brain, actually they've recognized that it's much more holistic, that the body speaks to the brain as much as the brain speaks to the body. And what we've discovered over the last few years is actually is up to 90% of your serotonin is made in your gut. And the vagus nerve travels from your brain all the way down to your gut, looking at being one of the most integral kind of parts of the nervous system. And so we've looked at, in the research of the last few years, recognizing that the gut is almost like the second brain, and that your gut talks to your brain and creates as much chemical compounds as what perhaps we haven't kind of thought of up until now, which is really interesting. So we're recognizing now that there's more conversation between all parts of your body, and that your brain isn't just this center point that directs everything else. Your brain is part of the machine. And all the parts of your body are linked. They all impact each other, and that we have to live in a much more holistic basis. Otherwise, we're not going to live in as kind of healthy and as pure and as wonderful a way as we possibly can. And I think that what I've recognized, certainly within kind of Western medicine, is that they like to treat symptoms. So if you go to the doctor and you say that you're suffering from some upset, or that you're suffering from depression or anything along those lines, actually what you'll find is that they'll start to talk to you about the symptoms and start to try and deal with the anxiety that you're dealing with or the depression that you're dealing with, as opposed to actually recognizing that you are suffering from something that probably comes from a different rooted point. And that, yes, antidepressants can be really helpful, but we need to start to look at your diet and how you're eating and all of these other things to allow you to heal in a more holistic way. So food is just one of these components, and the food that you eat really does matter. So, you know, we need to think about that there is a dose response relationship. So that means that the more high quality the food is that you eat, the less likely you are to suffer from mental health issues. And they've seen a direct correlation between having a higher quality, more fresh fruit, vegetables, all of these wonderful things, by lowering intake of processed foods and a higher kind of plant-based diet. They've actually seen a dose response relationships between a high quality diet and you lowering and decreasing the risk of you having mental disorders such as depression and anxiety. Now, if you were to say this, like, you know, if you said, oh, I'm suffering from anxiety and depression, and somebody said, well, what have you eaten today? It seems like these two things are completely irrelevant. But science and studies have backed up that it is a dose-response relationship. And so the more that you eat that is healthy and highly plant-based and whole foods, so things that have come out the ground, things like vegetables and fruits, whole grains, nuts and seeds, the more that you eat of that actually means the better that you're going to feel, which is really interesting. And actually, there's been some studies in to say that a handful of cashews is almost as good as having an antidepressant a day. So they can release as much serotonin and as being as potent acting as what an antidepressant would be. Now, when you think about some of the side effects of antidepressants and some of the side effects of medication that people get prescribed to help them with mental health issues or depression, anxiety, and you think, well, you could have that pill or you could tailor your diet. Now, unfortunately, in our society, the pill looks like the easier one, but there comes with a lot of negative points as well. Whereas when you think about the food that you're eating and you increase to, you know, a higher variety of natural food substances and thinking about kind of eating more organic and maybe some better quality proteins, actually, the only things that you can have from that is benefits, because this isn't just something that can help to protect against mental health disorders and depression and stuff. It also helps to protect you against cancer, obesity, high blood pressure, and a lot of the other things that are running rife in our society at the moment. I mean, even with the COVID situation, they're seeing that people that are under the age of 60 that are responding worse to COVID-19 are the people who are suffering from obesity, and that this is a comorbid factor. So becoming more aware about what you're eating and recognizing that food isn't just for enjoyment, that food is fuel. And you wouldn't put like substandard petrol or diesel in your car because you know that it would damage it. You wouldn't put diesel in your petrol car, and you wouldn't put petrol in your diesel car because you know you damage it. And so you need to kind of take a bit of this approach really to food with what you're doing to make sure that you are fueling your body properly. And sometimes it can be really helpful to kind of run food diaries as well and log your moods. You know, if you go and eat something really, really sugary, full of high processed sugars, and then see how you feel a few hours after that, you know, and you'll notice that you get a crash, that you start to feel hangry, you start to feel kind of a bit mean afterwards, you know, a bit moody. And this is because of the reaction that the sugar has had on your body, that you have a cortisol spike, an insulin response, and these things can actually stop from processing cortisol in a normal manner. So it can trigger a stress response in your body. Things like dehydration can actually trigger a stress response in the body. And I heard an amazing fact the other day that 3 in 4 people on a daily basis suffer from dehydration. You know, a lot of people don't drink a lot of water, and it's one of the most important things. You are 80% water. And if that starts to drop, the cortisol response kicks into your body because your body is being told that it is in danger and that it is dehydrating, that it's in a dangerous situation. Now, you in your mind knows that you can go and get another glass of water anytime. However, your body has evolutionary processes to kick in a stress response because it doesn't know when it's going to get another drink. So don't talk to your body or yourself by allowing that, you know, stress response to kick in. Drink lots and lots of water. The first thing that I do when I get up in the morning is drink a good pint of water on an empty stomach, and that can help to rehydrate me after the 6 hours or 8 hours that I've been sleeping, where I've basically become dehydrated. Water should be the first thing that touches your lips, not the coffee, not the tea, not anything else. Drink a pint of water and then think about what a healthy breakfast you're going to have. So nice kind of display here about looking at some of the way that mental well-being and mental disorders are on opposite ends of scales. Now, I talk a lot about kind of, you know, moving up and down this scale. And I talk a lot with my clients in kind of, you know, group work, if you've ever been to groups with me, about that it's kind of like an upward spiral and a downward spiral. And once you're kind of at the top or bottom of one of these spirals, it's much easier to go down or up. Now, unfortunately, the down seems a little bit easier because gravity acts with you, as it were. So if you start to get to a position where you're suffering from fatigue or sadness or low energy because of your diet, actually these things are much easier to then become more pronounced in your life. So it's much easier to go from fatigue to low energy to anxiety, and then fall into more impaired functioning or suffering from mental health. But it works on the other side. So if you start to kind of deal with those things and actually facilitating good health in your body, but through using food as a tool, you can actually find that you move up the scale much easier. And not only working with food, but also a lot of the other things that I talk about, you know, positive mental attitude, about working with your thoughts and your beliefs and challenging yourself to be much more conscious in the way that you're living your life. You'll actually find that you move through the steps to become more happier as we go along. But it starts with a good diet. It starts with good sleep, good diet, and good kind of mental health. Now, the WHO talks about that depression actually affects 3 million people worldwide, which is really devastating, you know. And depression doesn't always have to be this very kind of, you know, massive thing. I think sometimes when you say depression, it can sound like a very heavy kind of like it's, oh, that's a mental health issue, that's not something I suffer from. But actually most people suffer from depression at some point in their lives from various things. I talk about kind of situational depression, where people maybe have gone through a bereavement and then suffer from depression, and then situational and then kind of chemical depression that can be caused by mental health problems or diet, or, you know, addiction to substances and so forth. So the problem is once you've kind of, as I said, once you've kind of got a toe in the pond, it's much easier to fall on in. So if you have something that's situational, where, you know, something, you lost your job perhaps, you might find that you lose your appetite, or your appetite changes, and then, you know, you become kind of less likely to want to go and do social activities. Once you start eating, either not eating enough, or perhaps some people comfort eat, and people don't tend to comfort eat salad, you know, people tend to comfort eat foods that have got that bliss point. Now, the bliss point was something that was developed by food industries to make you addicted to their food, and it was this perfect matching between fat, salt and sugar that made people unable to put their foods down. You know, and this is a billion dollar industry that has been made to make you addicted to their food. So don't try and fight that. You're not going to be able to fight it, because they're preying on really primordial urges of making sure that you're eating enough, you know, and not suffering from starvation, which you can't fight that. So you need to be very aware of the kind of foods that you eat, and aware that a lot of the very processed foods have been created to make you addicted and not to serve you nutritionally. The very processed foods are there and have been created to not only get you addicted, but to also last long on the shelf. And so they're very, very high in additives, very high in salt, very high in sugar, because both of these things are preservatives, and very high in fat to create that flavor density to make you want to keep going back. And actually, when they created the bliss point, it was really interesting, because they managed to create a fat and sugar substance, which is now the bliss point. And they were feeding this to rats. And the other opportunity was the rats could either go to cocaine water, or they could go and get the bliss point, which was the fat and the sugar mixture. And these mice were already addicted to the cocaine, but what they decided to do was they shunned the cocaine for the fat and sugar mixture. And when you think about how addictive cocaine is on a human body, that for these mice to want to prefer to go towards fat and sugar, you can see that those primordial urges within us to seek out sugar and fat to fuel ourselves, you can see why obesity rates have just soared in the last few sort of 30, 40, 50 years. Probably a bit longer than that, maybe 80 years, you know, where we've started to see produce food coming in. And actually it's becoming aware that these produce foods actually aren't really foods at all. They're food-like products. You know, foods are things that come from trees and come out the ground, and that are, you know, fruits and vegetables and things. These are things that your body is used to eating and should be eating. The things that your body has been eating, and our bodies as human beings, as a race, have been eating for thousands of years. But these food-like substances that we've now started to take in, things like highly processed, like crisps and biscuits and these sorts of things that are processed, the very processed foods, they're not things that your body is aware of. And so it causes stress and inflammation in the body, which can then in turn actually cause quite a lot of mental health issues, because your body is struggling to deal with these things. Now, what's interesting is that you'll see here that we've got external factors. Now, the more of these external factors you have, the more likely you are to suffer from mental health. Now, these things can be like social factors. So maybe if you grew up in care situation or foster care, or it could be that you don't have many friends because you've moved house, or it could be that you've broken up with your partner or something. These are social factors that can lead into mental health. You can think about genetic factors. If your parents have got mental health issues or suffer from schizophrenia or anything hereditary, then you may find that impacts you. Going on to biological factors, so things that are more about yourself, and then development factors, how you've been brought up. So if you've been brought up in a home that's got domestic violence, or you might have complex post-traumatic stress disorder, you're more likely to suffer from mental health. And then we've got things like the environmental factors. These are things that you can control a little bit easier. So thinking about how much water you drink, how much exercise you do, how much sleep you have. Now, that's part of this huge kind of network of things that you can actually control to help to prevent bad mental health coming in. to your life. And you know, we don't have a lot of control over our genetic factors. We don't have a lot of control over our development, or from our psychological factors. Those are the things that are difficult to control. But environmental factors is a really large part of it, and you're much more capable of being able to actually deal with it than you'd think. So being proactive with this is really important, and thinking about kind of lifestyle factors such as diet, physical activity, sleep, and alcohol and substance abuse. Now, substance isn't necessarily like, you know, things like heroin and cocaine, and we think about kind of recreational drugs when people talk about this, but even things such as sugars, like processed sugars, and things like nicotine and caffeine. These things can impact the way that your body regulates itself, and it can then incur things like anxiety or, you know, mental health things. So I mean, even if you think you have a, you know, too strong a coffee in the morning, you'll probably find you might be a little bit anxious. It's because you've triggered a stress response because of the amount of caffeine in it. So even just thinking about your caffeine use if you're suffering from any mental health issues is really important, because they are linked. And, you know, it's important to consider these things. Actually, how much is it impacting you? So holding a food diary or something like that would be really helpful. And putting down, like, how do you feel? After I eat blah, blah, I feel blah, blah. And then think about it, you know, how do you feel a few hours later? And log again, you know, a few hours later, I feel really hungry. I don't feel hungry. I feel satiated. Or do I feel happy? Has my mood changed? You know, if you find that every time you're eating refined sugars that you feel sadder, or you feel hungrier, or you feel anxious, then you could start to think about causation and correlation between the two. So we've got things like macronutrients. This might be something that you've heard of before. These are your standard things: carbohydrates, fats, proteins, and fibers. Now, these are what we call macronutrients. So they're big nutrients that make up parts of food, and they're essential to you. I'll be sending you a video of this, hopefully, if the video works. If not, I'll send you the PowerPoint so you can start to look through all of this at your own time, because we're pushed for time because of Zoom. Zoom only allows a certain amount of time, unfortunately, on them. Or they charge you an exorbitant amount. But I can send this over to you guys so you can have a bit of a read about it. But becoming aware about what these macronutrients are is important, because you need carbohydrates, you need fats, you need proteins, and you need fiber to have a full, healthy diet. And so eating a macronutrient diet, which is what a lot of people are doing these days, recognizing that you need a certain percentage of each depending on your calories, and working towards that for optimum nutritional density within your diet is quite important, and thinking about it. And it's not sort of something that I don't think my parents' generation ever really thought about this. They sort of just ate food, but the food was a little bit different to what we're eating now. So maybe we do need to be a little bit more kind of aware of these things. So dietary requirements, you know, we're thinking about unprocessed fruits, vegetables, legumes, which are things like pulses, so things like peanuts are legumes, things like butter beans and chickpeas and things like that. Think about nuts and whole grains. We need to eat about 400 grams, which it sounds like quite a lot, and it is quite a lot, because fruits and vegetables are quite voluminous foods, but sort of very nutrient dense, but also very low calorie. So this means you can fill up quite a lot on fruit and vegetable without taking too much of your dietary amounts away from you. So, and we've also got, you're thinking there about having kind of less sugars in your diet as well. So we need to make sure that we're having ideally 5%. So just 5% of your total energy intake from added sugar. And this is one of the hardest ones to do, I think, because actually if you go and look at all the back of foods, you'll find that there is added sugar in everything. So from your ketchup to your jam to your toast to your bread, even bread has got added sugar in it. So you're trying to tailor back everything as much as you can. So going to those kind of like markets and bakers where, you know, the things are fresh, and thinking more about artisanal food where, you know, things are typically preserved in old-fashioned ways, and sugar is a, you know, preserver. So you'll find things like jams and pulses and things like that could have things like that in it. But you need to kind of try and pare things back to be much more natural, much more straight, you know, straight from the ground. So thinking about less than 30% of your total energy intake from fats, and preferably these are as good a fats as you possibly can. So things like unsaturated plant fats. So things like avocados, coconut, thinking about kind of adding in olive oils and things like that to your diet, and not being frightened of fat, because fat is the thing that satiates you. Your brain is made, I think 90% of your brain is made up from fat, and it needs fat. You need fat in your body. I think we've gone through the whole low fat, fat-free kind of thing, and it didn't work because all they did was increase the sugar in our food. So let's move away from the fat-free stuff and look at using suitable fats, and staying the hell away from trans fat. Trans fat, your body doesn't know how to process it, and it causes inflammation and stress in the body. And then thinking about making sure that you've got enough salt in your diet. We need to have salt, but we don't need to have too much. And again, salt's a little bit like the sugar thing. They have added it to everything because it's a preservative. So be wary about the amount of salt that you've got in your foods, and be aware of the difference between salt and sodium. Sodium, you need to double to allow it to be part of your salt intake. So be aware of that as well, because you could be totaling that you're eating less salt than you actually are. So talking about kind of how your health increases, if you have mental health disorders, you're more likely to suffer from cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and cancers. And people who have suffered from depression are also at kind of higher risks of other types of health issues. So things like, gastrointestinal disorders are much more prevalent. And this is the sad fact that, when you start to go down the process of anxiety and depression, actually it's not just a mental disorder. You are triggering off very, very deep responses in your body and your autonomic nervous system that do impact your biology and the way that your physiology works. And so although it sounds very, very kind of negative, it is actually just recognizing that you are more in control than you think you are. You're very much in control of the things that you think, and you're very much in control of the way that you can react to things. And just because you have a thought, just because you have a belief or an emotion, it doesn't mean that that's real, and it doesn't mean that it's something that you have to have in your life. And this is something that I teach, and I'll be trying, I'll be doing more kind of seminars as we go along. But looking at just because you feel sad in that moment, you don't have to run with it. You can do something to pull yourself back from that ledge to actually make yourself happy, so you're not triggering your autonomic nervous response every single time you have an emotion. Emotions are fleeting. They're like clouds that just go across the brain. They don't have to be something that you partake in. And this is the process of mindfulness, of becoming aware of your thoughts and having thoughts consciously. So is your thought helpful to you? If it isn't helpful to you and it's triggering you and it's affecting your health, your physical and your mental health, then maybe you could think about ways to deal with these thoughts and feelings that you've got in a more proactive way. So then you're not having these kind of offsets, you're not being offsetting and triggering these responses in yourself. Because once an autonomic nervous system response is triggered in you, it's actually quite difficult to pull back from. And then you have to go down the process of kind of like, dealing with the fires, and you're kind of dealing with the fire instead of actually focusing on building the house. So build the house first. So inflammation is something that we can get, and the more that you have inflammation in your body, the more damaged your health becomes. So inflammation can come on from many things, but stress is something that causes systemic inflammation. So I was saying about protecting your thoughts and becoming more conscious with your thoughts. If you run with something that you think stressful, you're triggering a systemic inflammation response in your body as well. So it's not just your thoughts. It's not that your thoughts are happening up here and your body's down there. And this is where Western medicine was about separation of the two. Your thoughts are impacting your body. They are impacting your stress responses. They are impacting your autonomic response. And once you've triggered these things like cortisol, you are starting to trigger the fight or flight response. And once you're in that, you're not digesting as well. Your body isn't as healing. It's not doing a process called autophagy where it's clearing out dead cells. And this all comes from cortisol. So if you're having triggering thoughts, you're in triggering situations that are triggering a stress response in you, move out of it. because you are killing yourself in effect. You know, dealing with these thoughts and these processes will make you sick, and you don't need to do it. You know, another kind of thing is diet, you know, and inactivity. You know, if you're not moving around enough, humans are made to move. So we are there to walk long distances, to hunt and forage. So, you know, sitting on your couch all the time is really dangerous. You know, they're saying that sitting is the new smoking. So get up, make sure you're moving around at least once an hour. You know, if you're sitting down a lot and you haven't got a lot to do, I mean, we're all sitting down far too much, and certainly in quarantine and lockdown. But if you are sitting down a lot, get up, move around your house, move your body, make sure you take some nice deep breaths and start to kind of calm these stress responses in yourself. So your gut microbiome, this is where most of your serotonin is made, and serotonin is the happy hormone. So this is made in your gut. Your gut contains bacteria, and it is vital for a healthy body. It's vital for a healthy mind. And your gut flora prefers a high fiber diet. Now, if you're eating a plant-based diets are much more high fiber than a meat-based diet. Meat has no fiber in it at all. So you could eat a 3-ounce steak on its own with no fruits or vegetables, and you've had no fiber in that diet at all. That's not to say that there's not other benefits in meat, but I'm saying that high fiber diets are really important. So make sure that you're focusing on eating a high fiber diet. And the addition of probiotic foods like kefir, kombucha, things like live yogurts and kimchi can help to protect your gut microbiome as well. And I've got a bit of information there about probiotics and prebiotics to help you. Now, we've got some things like nutraceuticals. These are things like omega-3 fatty acids, things like a SAMe, which is a chemical compound that is naturally occurring in the body. And these things can really be helpful for dealing with depression, and reducing symptoms of depression. So then they've been proven that actually they can be as helpful as antidepressants in some cases. So things like vitamin D can be very helpful for your immune system, and again, there's linked to the COVID situation. And things like St. John's wort, which is a little yellow flower that's you'll see around in the UK. It's a natural thing to the UK, but that can be very helpful for depression. There is a contraindication with oral contraceptives for the ladies, and 5-HTP, which is like a tryptophan compound, which is very, very good to take, and it helps to, again, kind of replenish serotonin. So things like graphonia seeds from 5-HTP, and again, there's contraindication with some antidepressants with that. So thinking about kind of helping yourself with nutraceutical compounds and supplements can actually be really helpful to heal some of the lack that we have in our diets now. So there was a trial called the SMILES trial, ironically, and they were looking at kind of like observational evidence as to what kind of diet is the best, you know, across cultures and different life stages. So it didn't matter where you lived or what age you were, and looking at how that could be directly associated with mental health and particularly depression. And what the study showed was that higher intakes of fruit and vegetables, higher grains, fish, and lower intakes of highly processed and sugary foods was actually consistently associated with better mental health. So it leads us into the question of what the heck should we all eat? You know, and it showed us that the optimum diet was what they have decided to call the modified Mediterranean diet. Now, if you've ever been over to the Med, you'll see that they eat lots of avocados, lots of olive oil, lots of dairy, lots of fruits and vegetables, and lots of kind of nuts and things. You'll see there's lots of salads and very fresh food. So if you think about, you know, going to Spain, and it's a lot of sort of seafood and fresh food and very much kind of natural. You know, there's not a lot of kind of random dishes. It's very natural and kind of out of the ground and just cooked to the minimum amount. So you can see here a bit of a modified pyramid. That's half a pyramid. But this is the modified Mediterranean diet pyramid, and it's looking at things that you should eat daily and things that you should eat weekly. Now, alcohol, no more than 2 standard drinks, and we're doing that once a week. So if you're somebody that drinks a lot, this can really impact your mental health, and it can really impact stress responses, systemic inflammation, and cause anxiety and depression. So thinking about leafy vegetables, green leafy vegetables and tomatoes every day, vegetables with every meal, and half of your plate should be vegetables. Thinking about including a 30 grams, so 1.5 tablespoons of unsalted nuts daily. This will give you optimum balance of things like selenium, of omega-3, 6 and 9, and other kind of compounds that can help to keep happy. And thinking about reserving sweets for special occasions only. So having the bottom of your diet really made up all those whole natural foods, as natural as if you pulled them out the ground yourself. So bringing them back as less preparation. There's a rule called the 5-5 rule. So if you look at the back of something and it's got more than 5 ingredients on it, or any ingredient that you can't read, or it looks like you need a science room to break down, then don't put it back down and don't eat it. Because if you can't understand what that ingredient is, the likeliness of it is your body's not going to understand it either. So your body has had thousands of years of evolution eating natural diet, eating natural produce. And if you're trying to put something unnatural in it, the likeliness of it is it's not going to know how to process it. And so often what it will do, well, it will take the toxins, store that with a coating of fat, which is why everybody's suffering from severe obesity at the moment, is because of the toxic diet that we're eating, as well as the amount of refined sugar, but store that with fat, and then cause an inflammation response in the body, which again can cause people to have that kind of like, you know, chubby sort of look to them. And actually a lot of the time that's inflammation as opposed to just pure fat. So thinking about drinking lots and lots of water. Get up in the morning, first thing you do, drink lots of water. So some sort of dietary ideas here, you know, getting up, making sure that you're having a protein, some form of a starchy vegetable with food, and having some vegetables. So thinking about having a protein there, so like tin tuna, eggs, baked beans if you're vegetarian, things like baked potatoes, whole grain toast, whole pita bread. These are things that are low GI, so low glycemic index, which means that they don't stimulate an insulin response in you, which means you don't get that great peak and the great trough that causes you to have sugar highs and sugar lows and make you more hungry in the long run. And then things like vegetables, so hummus, salads, peppers, everything as fresh as you can, you know, with minimal preparation. It doesn't have to be hard. You know, this can just be as easy as a tin tuna, pita bread and some hummus. You know, you're chucking stuff on a plate. It doesn't have to be complex, but it does have to be fresh. And how can you start this? It's difficult. So start small, you know, start with manageable goals. Don't overwhelm yourself, guys. You know, try supplementing with some nutraceuticals. If you're suffering from, you know, anxiety or depression, start to bring in something like 5-HTP or St. John's wort if you can, and not on any of the medication. Obviously, talk to your doctors before you do this. And try to kind of help in that fashion, and then add in other things. So if you find that you're eating lots of kind of processed foods, don't try and take all that away from yourself. That's going to be too difficult. Start by adding things in first. So if you start to think, I'm going to add in an extra portion of vegetables with every single one of my meals, and you start to say, instead of taking, like, say if you have a coffee for your 11sies, you have your coffee from Starbucks or whatever, full of sugar, brilliant, you have that, but you have that and you have some crudités and some hummus with it as well. So you start by adding things in, and then when you start to find that you are nutritionally backed up and you're actually looking after yourself fully, you'll find that removing the other stuff is going to be easier, because you're not going to have such heavy cravings for it, because we are all starving on a cellular level. If you haven't got a fantastic diet, we are starving on a cellular level. So we are all eating a lot, but we're not necessarily feeding our cells. So it's about adding things in before you start taking things away. So things like smoothies with a lower fruit content to kind of watch that sugar, they're very good. And soups are great. So, you know, if you're eating your normal meals, maybe it could be something that's not particularly healthy. You may be thinking about having a soup before you eat that, just as a good way of adding in some nutrition. So I wanted to quickly tell you, I've got a new Facebook challenge coming up soon, guys. It's a 3-day Facebook challenge. You are welcome to join. It's free. I'm going to be setting up a group on Facebook for you all to join, so you can have direct contact with me. And we're going to be looking at doing some of those things that I talked about in the beginning, about changing the way that you think about things. So looking at the things that you're thinking, how can you control your mental health a little bit more, and thinking about kind of how to stop triggering yourself. So if you're thinking thinking these detrimental thoughts and you're thinking these negative thoughts, how can we stop that? How can we create more of a positive place for you? So it's not just diet on its own. Diet's going to help a lot, but you need to think about the thoughts that you're thinking. You need to think about those sorts of things as well. So I've got this free Facebook challenge coming up soon. I haven't set a date on it, but if you're interested, let me know and I'll sign you up to my mailing list. And then you can get all the details of that as it comes along. And I just wanted to say that I've got, this is something I do. I use Simply Supplements online and they do a referral program. So I've got 20% off discount, which I'm not an affiliate to this company or anything. This is just something that I have that I thought you guys would like. So if you do want that, let me know and I can send you over a discount code as well. But I just want to say thank you ever so much for coming. Thank you to the new people that I've met today. If you've got any questions or you want anything, let me know. You can send me a message. And what I'll be doing is sending you a recording, hopefully, of this, because there's lots of information I know. So I'll send you a recording via your sort of wherever I've spoken to you with links and stuff. But I really appreciate you all coming and look forward to speaking to you all soon. So for those of you that kind of had problems getting in and started late or whatever, you'll be able to catch the beginning on the video that I send over. So I wish you all a wonderful day. I hope you all look after yourselves very, very much. And hopefully I'll see you all for the free Facebook challenge as well. Take care of yourselves, guys. Look after, and I'll speak to you soon. Okay? Much love to you all.